Carrie, I'm getting too many clients that are just kicking the tires. They're DIYers. All they're here to do is to interview me about what we do and our best practices and steal our secret sauce. And they're going to do it on their own anyways. So why bother?
Is that the question of the day? Why bother?
Well, what do we do?
Yeah.
I get this feeling that people are just trying to get information out of me. I think it's a sales conversation. I show up all excited. I'm going to win a deal today. And they start peppering me with questions that seem to indicate that they're just trying to figure out how to do something internally. And they're not actually that serious about working with me. And then I probably halfway through the conversation, I get really deflated when that realization hits me that, oh, they're not actually buyers. They're just DIYers. And then even if there was a deal to be won, I'm no longer interested in it. It's apparent and everything fizzles out and there's no next steps because I don't want to waste my time with a DIYer.
Wow. What a bummer.
Is that honest enough?
That's quite honest. Yes, very honest, and something that all of our, many of our clients, most of our clients, I would probably say all of our clients have dealt with at one point or another. So I'm sure the folks that are listening can very much relate. And
that's not me talking if you didn't catch my tone. Yeah. This is me impersonating you, the listener.
We can tell by the voice you were putting on.
We have a ton of experience over the years. A ton of experience sniffing out and dealing with DIYers. So I have a lot to say about this, but this is what I hear quite a bit from our listeners, our audience, our clients that they're dealing with and just frankly don't know how to handle. Is this just the way it is? Is there a way around it? Is there a better way? Are they missing something? What do we do?
Yeah. I think, it's interesting what you just said, which is we have experience sniffing out and dealing with. And to me, those are the two things to talk about today, because the first thing is understanding where this prospect is landing, right? Because in my experience, you have people that come to you because, very clearly, overtly, they want to buy, right? You can tell right off the bat. It's obvious. Off you go. You have your sales conversation. Everything is good. Then you have your people who present in this way you're talking about, right? As DIYers, you can sort of tell that they're on the call because they want to learn some stuff and they want to, pick your brain. They'll often use the phrase "pick your brain." They want to, they want to squeeze all the information out of the conversation that they can get. And to me, though, those people can be subdivided into two groups as well, right? There is the true DIYer, the people who absolutely are coming to the call to get whatever information they can and have zero intent to buy. And you're not going to change their mind, and it's just how it is. That's a relatively small subset, but I think it's important to talk about how to identify them. Then there's the other group that comes to you in that same stance, right? They're asking the same kinds of questions. They're sort of poking around in the same way. It feels like maybe they might not so much be interested in working with you, but the reality is, handled well, they can become not just a client, but a raving fan kind of client, right? Like you're not dragging them across the finish line. They truly want to find the right solution. So I think it's important to talk about A, how to sniff them out, and then B, how to manage that conversation once you assess that somebody, is maybe coming to you in that way or asking those kinds of questions, but actually does need a solution, does potentially need or want to work with you. So let's talk about the sniffing out first, because I think it's interesting that you use that terminology.
Well, I think a big mistake that we made, and I prefaced this earlier by saying we have a lot of experience with DIYers. So rest assured, in our market, helping B2B consultants with pipeline and positioning, et cetera, that is not the kind of thing that people default to. Oh, I need to get some help with this. They default to, I need to use now ChatGPT and Claude and figure things out on my own, or buy some, $100, $1,000 course and watch some YouTube videos. Like that's often what they default to, not let me go, hire a consultant and work with a program. So we get, more than our fair share of DIYers. And I think just to kick this off here, a mistake that I have definitely made in the past is treating this kind of DIY mindset as if it's like an unchangeable personality trait. Okay, like we would just label people. Oh, that person's they didn't buy. They're a DIYer. I'm like we wrote it across their forehead. DIYer, right? Tire kicker. Never gonna buy. Never gonna get help. And don't get me wrong, with some people that's true. But what I've come to learn over the years is, and we'll get to your question about sniffing them out in a second. What I've come to learn over the years is this DIY mindset is a mindset at a point in time. And it's with certain people very much changeable with the right information, with the right context. And if you think about it, if you're drawing this conclusion that someone's a DIYer in the discovery conversation, typically where that kind of signaling is going to take place, well, they don't even know what your solution is, most likely, because chances are you don't have a lot of, published, publicly available information about your offer, your solution. So if they don't know what your solution is, how could they be anything but a DIYer? If they don't know tangibly how you can help or what the offer is, then by default, they're a DIYer because that's what they know. And so I think just call that out right away. Be careful about labeling the buyer, labeling the client as, oh, this person's a DIYer, they're never going to buy. And then like you delete them from your CRM, you delete them from your pipeline. There's no nurture, there's no follow-up, there's no ongoing conversation because they're a DIYer. No, they might be at this point in time. Absolutely. And that can absolutely change with the right information, with the right context, both in the immediate and in the future.
Yeah, I think that speaks broadly to, if I just sort of pull back from the conversation we're having at the moment, it speaks broadly to how we approach sales conversations, right? You have so much more control over how a sales conversation goes than often you give yourself credit for, right? As someone who's having these conversations. And if you take a lot of them, then you start to see patterns as people want to do, right? And you start to your point, immediately start to categorize people. And there's some utility in that in terms of, looking at your stats and understanding your numbers and seeing what works with some people and what doesn't work with others. But the reality is that it can really lead to a deficit of curiosity and can really have you step back from having the conversation that could move things in, the direction that is the best direction for the client. And if you go into the sales conversation with clarity around that being the reason that you're there, as opposed to I need to immediately figure out what this person's all about in the first 5 minutes, judge them, assess them, and then either run a script or walk away, you're going to, be in a much better position overall. So I think there's a mindset question or a mindset, consideration that you're getting close to as well.
Yeah. And there's absolutely value in labeling where they're at in their process, in their journey, without labeling the client themselves, right? Something that we talk about quite a bit in our positioning workshop, powerpositioningworkshop.com, $7, is that clients don't knee jerk to hiring consultants when they're confronted with a problem, which consultants would love to believe that was true, right? We'd love to live in that world where client goes, oh, I think we have this problem. Who do we know? What consulting can we hire? And unfortunately, that's not reality. Reality is that they're going to make some kind of an internal attempt to solve the problem before they open themselves up to hiring somebody externally, because every client in the world will tell you that they would prefer to solve the problem internally than go external and hire a consultant, not only because of the money. People think it's the money. It's can be the money, but in a B2B context, it's usually rarely the money. No one's spending out of pocket. It's more so the disruption. It's more so the time. It's more so the opportunity cost. It's more so the risk of what if it doesn't work. Point being, they're going to make some kind of internal attempt before they open themselves up to evaluating or hiring consultants. So to answer your question, how do we sniff them out? Well, I'm going to answer that kind of in the inverse. How do you know someone's ripe to buy? Mm-hmm. And you know they're ripe to buy when a couple of things are true, maybe more than a couple. Let's see off the top of my head. Number one is they've tried some things. They've made some internal attempts, right? This is very important because if they have not made any internal attempts yet, then a couple of questions come up. One is this even important? If you haven't bothered to do anything about it yet internally with the resources you have, I'm not sure you're ready to invest in external expertise because you haven't demonstrated that this is even a priority via your actions with the resources you have. And secondly, do you have enough belief that you can't do it on your own? Because to hire a consultant, I have to believe at some level that they have expertise that we don't have. We can't do it on our own. If we could, we would. So therefore, hire a consultant. But if I haven't attempted anything internally, or the attempts have been, mild and superficial, how can I reasonably conclude that we can't do it on our own? So a telltale sign they're ready is when there have been, sufficient, and this is obviously subjective, right? But robust, sufficient internal attempts, and the conclusion has either been drawn or is actively being drawn that I think we need to go outside here. And then second and related would be urgency, that there's an urgency to actually get this thing done.
Yeah, and you can hear when they come to the conversation how they're talking about it, right? They're talking about it as a complex problem. They're talking about it as a problem that they truly don't know the solution to. Your DIYer will come to the conversation with a list of things, I should do this, right? I should go here. I should, take step A. I should blah, blah, blah. And they're sort of testing that with you because they don't yet understand that the problem is complex enough, to your point, that they can't just, put a Band-Aid on it and solve it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. Their line of questioning, without meaningful attempts to solve the problem, their line of questioning is going to be fairly pedestrian, right?
Yeah.
Less sophisticated. Their awareness of the scope of the problem is going to be demonstrated by their line of questioning.
Yeah.
Now, those are not bad leads, though. This is the thing, right? It's not, okay, they're DIYers. They're just too early. They're too soon, right? And, we have to stop thinking about the sales process from the seller's terms, right? From the seller's perspective, from your perspective, the sales process begins when someone books a call or has a meeting with you. But their process of solving the problem began way before that, maybe weeks, months before that. And so someone who's coming to you as a DIYer, having the conversation is certainly a signal that maybe they're further along on the path than you think they are. But even if you've kind of diagnosed that, okay, they're in that DIY stage, it doesn't mean they're not going to become a buyer. It just means that they need to try and fail some more in order to have the awareness required that they can't do it on their own and have the pain and the urgency to motivate them to work with you. So it's not that it's not a deal, it's just not a deal today. And therefore, how you play your cards needs to be materially different than if they were ready to buy today.
That's exactly it. So let's talk about how to proceed through that conversation because, you're right. And what you're saying and how often consultants will approach this, because as soon as they start to get that inkling, right, that those person's just kicking tires, that they're just a DIYer, the instinct, especially for someone who maybe hasn't quite found comfort in this, discovery call process yet, is to just extricate themselves, right? Give up on it. To your point, put a big X over that person's name, set them aside, and stop the conversation. When the reality is this particular conversation where where you're having this conversation with this quote unquote DIYer is a great opportunity to propel that, level of realization and level of understanding of the problem forward. Because the thing to remember is that you do understand the problem, right? You know how complex it is. You know that isn't just, three, tactics on a list to put into place to solve it. And so you have a real opportunity now to help them really get clear on what it is that they need.
So this is where that finding that we've shared before from a study done by the RAIN Group becomes really relevant, where in really short order. There was a large study done of professional services transactions where they ranked the winners of the deals against the losers on 43 some odd different criteria. And what they found was that the winners of these 600 some odd transactions, the one thing they did better than everybody else, and this is consulting professional services, is, in the buyer's words, that the seller educated me with new ideas and perspectives. The seller educated me with new ideas and perspectives. And that's effectively what you have to do. I mean, arguably at every stage, but certainly more materially at the earlier stages of the buyer's journey, where the client doesn't really know what they're doing. They don't really have really well-informed opinions. They don't really have much experience. They haven't made many attempts. And so here, the more you can provide what we call problem education, right, which is different from solution education. A lot of folks jump into solution education. Well, here's my thing, right? Well, here's my solution. Well, here's my, okay. Well, there's a time and place for that, and it may be fairly immediate. But solution education is only relevant if we can agree on what the actual problem is. And so often where, prospects go wrong, and I'm sure you can agree with me here as a listener, is they haven't even accurately diagnosed what the problem is. And so this is where you have an opportunity to really shape the way that they view the problem, in part by having a frank discussion around what their plans are and what they're going to attempt and what they're going to try. Because if they're remotely serious about solving the problem, even if they haven't done a sufficient amount of work internally yet, they likely have plans. They likely have ideas. If they don't, then they're really early and not serious at all, right? But most likely they have some ideas. They have some conceptions on what might work. And so the thing to do at this stage is to have a very frank discussion about those ideas, about those plans, about those strategies, not from a place of, well, that's never going to work. You should hire me. Because if you say that in any manner of words, they're going to write you off as someone trying to close a deal and your advice doesn't get heard. But from a place of intellectually challenging the premise of those ideas and drawing out some of the consequences while staying in a, I don't actually care if you buy state, which is maybe another conversation, but as a general rule of thumb, in all sales conversations, your attitude should be complete detachment from the sale.
Yeah, and this is where, again, I think we go often into sales conversations, with a script, with a path that we want to follow with, and when that starts to go off the rails, then, we sort of lose our direction. What we're really talking about here is having a conversation with somebody, right? Asking them questions, because to your point, this can't be you lecturing from on high. Yes, you know more than this person does. It's obvious. It's the reason that you do what they do. That's the reason that they're coming to you. But what you're really hoping to help them with, and I'm saying it in that way for a reason, right? It's not what you're really hoping to make them think or what you're really hoping to get them to. What you're really hoping to help them understand is, the scope and the depth of their problem. And so consultants often get concerned about, okay, well, I don't want to give away too much on this call, right? I don't want to give too much information. I don't want to tell them too much. Again, that's the solution education that we're not trying to do. What you want to do is just have the discussion with them, meet them where they are. And, with all of the expertise that you have, ask them questions and be curious that, in a way that moves them along that path, that helps them see, that's going to support them regardless of what their decision is at the end of the 45 minutes that you're talking to them on the phone.
Yeah, and let's get really concrete here. I'll give you an example. You probably gathered by now, if you've been listening to this show for a minute, that what do? We help B2B consultants with two things, ultimately: positioning and pipeline. Right? We help you fix your positioning and then go to market and build pipeline. Now, there are certain beliefs that you need to have in order for us to work together. And one of those beliefs is that your positioning is a problem. And I've yet to meet very many people for whom that's not the case, right? Unless they've actively been working on it for years. And so one of the telltale signs that we get that somebody might not be ready to work with us, they might be too early, is if their mind is very focused on the prospecting side of things. Well, I got to figure out LinkedIn, and what do I put on my profile, and who do I reach out to, and what do I publish, and how do I use AI? And if they're very tactically focused, it's just not a good fit for us, because we don't believe that their problem is by and large tactical. We believe it's strategic, i.e. positional. And then as a secondary problem to solve, there are prospecting activities that need to be engaged in on the back of strong positioning. So if someone's not there because they haven't been beat up enough to come to the conclusion that their positioning is a problem, they haven't lost enough deals or had enough conversations, what have you, our job now is not to sell them on our solution, to your point, Carrie, because we're not even on the same page. We have to get on the same page before they can see the value in our solution. In other words, we have to agree on the problem. And so now I'm asking, or our team is asking questions that help us determine, can we get this person to see that their positioning is actually the problem? How many conversations have you been having? How are those going? Why'd you lose that deal?
Mm-hmm.
Why are clients going the other way? Like, we're not telling them. This is the Socratic method, right? We're not telling them because there's not a lot of value in that. We're helping them come to the conclusion on their own. And sometimes we get there in short order, and sometimes we don't. But that's ultimately the path.
Yeah, and the reality is, if you don't get there, even if by some weird, what's that?
Not a buyer.
No, not a buyer. And if they do become a buyer by some weird fluke, and they become a buyer, but you still haven't agreed on the problem, they're going to be an unhappy client. Absolutely.
Bad client. Been there too.
Yeah.
Been there too. Bad client. Yeah, like that. And that's like, you want to accelerate deals. You want to get to the heart of the matter quickly. You want to find good clients. You want to frame clients properly so they become excellent partners and raving fans, like you said, Carrie. Agree on the problem really, really quickly, as fast as possible. And if they don't see it your way yet, guess what? In 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, when the consequences that you predicted would happen from going down the path that they're going down end up happening, they're going to go, oh yeah, so-and-so said this would happen. We should probably go back and have a conversation.